Hey everyone and welcome back again. So in the last video we were discussing about the basics of interface endpoint. We also looked into it in a demo perspective. So in today's video we'll go ahead and implement interface endpoint and look into the steps that are involved. So going to the VPC management console, let's go to the endpoints here. Now, in case if you have a gateway endpoint still running, you can go ahead and delete it so that the unnecessary charge does not come. However, today for the time being, let's quickly focus on the interface endpoints here. Now, as we're discussing that there are multiple services that are supported by the interface endpoint here. The one that we are interested is EC2 for today's video to keep things a little different, because for the gateway endpoint, we had made use of the S3 service. So to keep things different, we'll be making use of the EC2 service, and the one that we are looking for is the first one, which is EC2. Once the service is selected, the next important thing is to select the availability zone where the interface endpoint would be created. So basically, this is a network interface as we were discussing. So this network interface would be associated with which of the subnets is something that you can look into. Just for simplicity, just let's associate it with all of the subnets. Let's go a bit down, and here you have the security group. Let's leave it default. The policy will leave it as default. Let's go ahead and create the interface endpoint. Alright, so the interface endpoint is created. Now do note that it takes a little amount of time for the interface endpoint to be created. So till that time, let's do one thing. Let's go to the security group. So there should be one security group that should be associated with the network interfaces. And let's go ahead and allow the VPC CIDR. So under the inbound rules here, you currently only have the source of default. Let's quickly change this, and I'll allow the VPC CIDR here, which is 172.31.0.0.16. All right, let's go ahead and save this. That's great. So approximately after 2 to 3 minutes, our interface endpoint is up and running. Now within the EC2 instance, let's go ahead and try it out. So let me go ahead and connect to the public EC2. Now again, since this interface endpoint is associated with all of the subnets, it will work perfectly well in the public as well as the private EC2 instances. So let me quickly go ahead and connect to the public EC2 instance here, and let's do it from the second tab as well. Alright, let's switch to root and just verify if the TCP dump utility is available. If you just run the TCP dump command, you should see the packet capture. Let's do a Control-C. Alright, perfect. So now from the first tab, we'll go ahead and do a AWS EC2 describe instances, and the region would be US East 1. Alright, just for simplicity. So this is a different region from where our interface endpoint is created. If you press enter, it is fine. If you are getting unauthorized operation, that is perfectly fine. But the primary aim for this part is to verify to which endpoint this connection is going to. Alright. So if you'll quickly do a TCP dump on the destination port of 443 here, let's run the same command yet again. And you see it is going towards a public endpoint over here. So now this time, let's run the same command and just change the region to US West 2, where our EC2 instance and the interface endpoints are. Let's run the TCP packet capture yet again. We are getting unauthorized operation, that is fine. And now you see the traffic is now directing to 172.31.33.225. So this is nothing but an interface endpoint. Along with this, you also have the API endpoint, which is EC2 US2S2.amazonaws.com. So this should be directed towards the interface endpoint. Now for this, from my workstation, let me go ahead and do a NS lookup just to understand how things are working. You see it is directing to a public IP over here. Alright, so EC2 US2S2.amazonaws.com is directing to a public IP. Now the same thing, if we do it from our EC2 instance, you see it is being directed to our interface endpoint IP. So there are multiple IP addresses of our interface endpoints, and this is where the traffic is redirected to. So this is a completely private connection within the VPC itself. Now from our public EC2, let me also go ahead and connect to a private EC2 instance ending with the IP of 30.90. So let's quickly verify. So the private EC2 IP is 30.90. Now since this private EC2 IP does not have an internet route, if we do a AWS EC2 describe instances, let's specify a region of US East 1. Now for this specific connection, you will not see any output. So neither you will see the output, neither you will see any access denied message, primarily because the API call is not being able to complete here. However, this time instead of US East 1, if you will just do a US West 2, you will get an access denied message, primarily because the call was successfully made to the EC2, but since the instance does not have an appropriate IAM role policy, you are getting a permission denied message. Great. So I hope with this you understood at a high level overview of how the interface endpoint works. Now, as we were discussing, the interface endpoint basically enables us to use the security group to restrict the access to the endpoint. So let's also try it out so that there is no confusion that arises at a later stage. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and allow only the IP address of our public EC2 to connect to the security group associated with the network interface of the interface endpoint. So let's do one thing. Let's go to the security group. Let's modify the security group here. And within the inbound rule, we'll only allow, instead of the entire CIDR, we'll only allow the IP address of our public EC2. Alright, so now if you run this specific command, even this specific message that we were seeing should not appear. So let's try it out. And as expected, now you see you're not able to see anything, primarily because the traffic is denied at a security group level. Now along with this, the interface endpoint, it supports the access control both via the security group as well as policy. So you can go ahead and create a policy based on which the access decision can also be made. Great. So I hope with this you understood the practical aspect of creating an interface endpoint, and with this we'll conclude today's video.